all you literary legends and luminaries. I'm Julie and welcome to another episode of Booksmart. Today's book is kind of a true crime story called The Mother Next Door, Medicine, Deception, and Munchausen by Proxy by Andrea Dunlop and Mike Weber. I remember when I learned of Munchausen by Proxy when I was in high school. I was obsessed with TV movies that were based on true stories, and there was one about Munchausen by Proxy. I tried to find it online. It might have been a child's cry for help, but I don't think that one was based on a true story. I was fascinated with multiple personality disorder, and then in reading about that, I stumbled across Munchausen by Proxy. So I was aware of this seemingly rare condition in the 1980s and early 1990s when I was in junior high or high school. If you are familiar with the series The Act or Gypsy Rose, you probably know that Munchausen by Proxy is a disorder when a parent or caregiver, usually the mother, deliberately makes a child ill for the sake of attention and sympathy. The Mother Next Door dives into 3 separate stories of Munchausen by Proxy, so I thought I would give it a shot. The stories themselves were riveting, but I didn't always find the writing compelling. Andrea Dunlop is a writer and has a podcast called Nobody Should Believe Me. I knew nothing about this at the time I bought the book. Apparently the book takes what was in her podcast, which seems to be the trend as of late. I've probably read a half dozen books over the past 2 or 3 years that have all been podcasts first. Mike Weber, the second author, is a detective who at one point was one of the only detectives in the nation who was considered an expert in medical child abuse. Dunlop approaches Weber about writing a book of his experiences, so The Mother Next Door recounts 3 stories that were under Weber's investigation in Texas. But Dunlop herself has personal connections to Munchausen by Proxy, which is very unclear in the introduction. I was so frustrated, I researched it online. Apparently, Dunlop's sister was investigated twice, I believe, for Munchausen by Proxy in relation to her daughter. Why Dunlop doesn't develop this more clearly in the book, I have no idea because it was all over in articles on the internet. Either do it or don't, but writing vaguely about it only irritated me as a reader. Don't expect your readers to know about your podcast or your personal story. Yet, the first story was riveting and I couldn't put it down. It is about Hope Ybarra and her 5-year-old daughter, Sophia. This one is a complex case since Hope herself pretends to have cancer. The second case is regarding Brittany Phillips and her 3-year-old daughter, Alyssa. The third case is about Mary Welch and her 10-year-old son, Gabriel. That story kind of fell apart for me. The chapter was laden with names of people in the DA's office and such, and the bureaucracy of it all, that I lost sight of the story. Through these 3 stories that had very different outcomes, you see the similarities between Munchausen by Proxy cases, alleged eating problems that lead to a feeding tube, no one else seeing the abused child with any other symptoms that the mother constantly talks about, and a system that doesn't always work. CPS was involved with the cases before law enforcement got involved. That's what makes Munchausen by Proxy trickier to prove. Medical abuse is incredibly complicated, which Dunlop has done a good job in showing her reader. Here's my question, and it doesn't necessarily have to do so much with the book, but what I didn't understand is how these children are getting very serious, intrusive, and dangerous surgical procedures done, but sometimes the doctors doing the procedures aren't the ones doing the testing. Gabriel had a stent put in his brain, yes, his brain, based solely on what the mother told the doctors. How is this possible? I'm not blaming the doctors, mind you, but doctors don't even listen to me about my own symptoms. They minimize everything I tell them, then want me to do expensive tests to rule out what have you. Yet with no medical records or tests, a hospital in Minnesota put a brain stent in a child because the mother was insistent on it. And this was for an alleged disease that a 10-year-old had, a condition that has never been seen in children. I'm just baffled. My apologies for getting away from the book, but I just don't get it. Doctors I've been to want to retest you 40 times before they do anything, and that's within the same hospital. I guess what I'm getting at is that some of the medical abuse involved wouldn't be able to occur if doctors didn't do those procedures and asked more questions before doing those said procedures. But Dunlop does explain this and how this is a conundrum for hospitals because parents are the primary source for the medical background on a child, and many doctors have no question whatsoever to think that a parent is deliberately making stuff up. Mothers have also manipulated test results, which she explains a little bit in the book also. Still, another element I find fascinating is that family members don't ask questions. Even in the stories Dunlop presented, one of the husbands just believed everything his wife said about their daughter. That's bizarre to me, especially in this day and age. Hope's family was never involved with the alleged cancer treatment, and Hope was able to pull off the ruse for years. It just baffles me. Wouldn't you ask questions? So what if Hope shaved off her own eyebrows to make it look like a side effect of chemotherapy? Have you ever seen someone go through chemotherapy? I have, and surely she couldn't have lost so much weight. I don't know. Dunlop does partially develop this aspect, but not completely. Two of the cases in the book are those with bigger families, so there's a lot of cover-up happening. I just don't know how everyone believes whatever it is they're told, especially when stuff doesn't add up. The Mother Next Door was worth the read because the three stories are riveting and horrific and shed light on a misunderstood disorder, one that could take the life of a child. Those with Munchausen by proxy are experts at lying and acting and even know their medical jargon, so the book gave a comprehensive look at a very disturbing disorder. The writing style wasn't always as compelling as maybe I would have liked, but I appreciate the exposure Dunlop and Weber give to Munchausen by proxy and the awareness needed to help the likes of CPS, police, district attorneys, and especially medical doctors to understand the complexity of such medical child abuse. There is still so much disbelief about this disorder that those investigating don't dig any deeper. They refuse to believe such cases can exist and that it could mean life or death for the child involved. One would think with Gypsy Rose's story out there in multiple mediums and documentaries, police and prosecutors would be more inclined to investigate further that a child's life may be in grave danger, but yet they don't all believe it. I don't know how closely The Mother Next Door parallels the podcast, but if you want to know more about Munchausen by proxy, you should read the book. If you are any sort of medical worker or social worker or involved with CPS or work with children, The Mother Next Door is a must-read to understand not just the symptoms of Munchausen by proxy, but also the horrid bureaucracy that surrounds such cases. Dunlop and Weber have only shown just a tiny slice of the problem, but in those three cases, you will learn a lot about it. The Mother Next Door is informative and worth the read. Dunlop ended her introduction with this: open your eyes. Thanks for watching. As always, my goal at Booksmart is to get a little bit smarter, one book at a time.